Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a little exchange between a Reform UK representative who used to be a Conservative government advisor, so presumably has some idea of how politics works, and a Labour MP, because in it she exposed just how little she understands about Labour's strategic relationship with Reform UK, and it does make you wonder if this misunderstanding is more widespread in Nigel Farage's party. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So there was a little clip from a BBC discussion that I saw, which involved Lucy Harris, who was, I think, a Brexit Party candidate, but also a Conservative MEP, and has also acted as an advisor to the Conservatives. I'm going to describe her as a Reform UK representative in this piece because although I don't actually know which party she currently really is part of, she's nonetheless presenting Reform UK's position. And the discussion was also with Dan Tomlinson, who's a Labour MP. And the discussion was about Labour's moves to ban second jobs. Now, I'm presuming that as part of the wider discussion, television work was discussed, because so far only lobbying and certain consultancy jobs have been banned. I don't think any of the things being banned at the moment really impact Nigel Farage, as far as I know. But there are moves to look at other types of second job as well, which could, of course, include television presenting. And Reform UK's Lucy Harris argued that Labour were only doing this because they feel threatened by Nigel Farage and are trying to get him off the TV. Now, Labour's Dan Tomlinson said he didn't feel threatened by Farage, to which Harris responded that he should be. Now, there are a few points of interest in just those few little lines of discussion. The first is this concept of Labour pushing bans on second jobs to get Nigel Farage off the television. Now, this is the easiest to debunk. It makes absolutely no sense at all because Labour have been proposing these moves for several years, long before Farage even announced that he would be standing for Parliament. In fact, they'd announced it at a time when Nigel Farage was not even leader of Reform UK. He'd stood down. He was just doing GB News stuff. To which you immediately wonder how someone who had a job advising a national government could be incapable of thinking in terms of timelines. But then you remember that plenty of posh idiots managed to wangle jobs in government, and the Tories made so many incredible missteps over the past 10 years. It's not exactly a strong endorsement for the sort of advisors they were employing, was it? Now, Tomlinson could have just pointed this out himself, and he would have killed the argument dead, but he decided to simply respond that he didn't feel threatened by Farage. Harris insisted that he should. But should he? Well, I think this is where you get a fundamental misunderstanding for, Reform UK. And you think, is this more widespread in the party? Should Labour MPs feel threatened by Nigel Farage? Now, there is both a yes and a no answer to that question, as there often is in politics. Yes, because everyone who wants to be a Labour MP, particularly, should want a UK which is free of the hateful and cruel policies and attitudes of Nigel Farage. The fact that Farage is more effective than most would be in his position at persuading members of the public to hold those views is something that Labour in general should feel threatened about. And Farage is a big reason why Labour have such bullshit, shall we say, policies on immigration, asylum, and even worse, rhetoric. So in general terms, yes, Farage is a threat to Labour and by extension, Labour MPs. However, this particular discussion seems to be specifically about the notion of Nigel Farage, the MP. After all, no rules on second jobs could possibly affect Nigel Farage's television work if he weren't in Parliament. This is just about second jobs for MPs. So should Labour MPs feel threatened by Nigel Farage, the MP? No, not at all. Not even close. In fact, and this is very unfortunate in many ways, Labour have quite a tricky relationship with Farage because on the one hand, unlike with the Tories, Labour are more than happy to call out Farage's policies as the sort of fevered imaginings of someone who ate the wrong mushrooms. But strategically, they don't mind Nigel Farage and Reform UK election times, or at least most of them. Nationally, Reform UK take way more Conservative votes than Labour votes, and Reform UK are particularly good at doing this in seats which are contested between Labour and the Conservatives. Now, it's true that Reform UK do have the capacity to challenge some Labour seats. There are, as a result, some Labour MPs who actually would feel threatened by Farage strategically. You know, these would be ones in constituencies where the Tories wouldn't win, but Reform UK might. Places like near me would be places like Barnsley, which were considered under threat from Reform this summer, but in the end, Labour won them comfortably. But that might not be the case at the next election. If Labour aren't seen to be delivering enough in those areas specifically, and Reform UK continue to professionalise their operation and grow, then in actual fact, yes, there could be some Labour MPs who are threatened by Farage and should feel threatened by Farage. But Dan Tomlinson personally is not in this boat. Now, his constituency is Chipping Barnet. It's a marginal where his challenger is very clearly the Conservative candidate, not Reform UK. I'm going to emphasise, as I always do, you cannot just add up Reform UK and Conservative votes and go, oh, if one or the other candidate has stepped down, all of those votes would have gone to the other candidate. That is not the case. That is ridiculous to suggest it's the case. However, because the Conservatives and Reform UK both like to play this innumerate game, if you did that for Chipping Barnet, if the Reform UK candidate had stood down and all of those votes had transferred to the Conservative candidate, Theresa Villiers, she would have won. The Tory candidate would have won. But even though this isn't what would happen in practice, Tomlinson was still in a close fight with the Conservatives, and Reform UK almost certainly helped him by taking way more votes away from his rival than himself. In fact, it may well be that Reform UK actually helped him win. So Tomlinson is absolutely telling the truth when he says he doesn't feel threatened by Nigel Farage, and the same would apply to many other Labour MPs from this strategic point of view. It is entirely possible that if things go well for Reform UK and not as well as hoped for Labour, yes, Reform UK could take some Labour seats at the next election. Now, that is obviously not good news for those affected Labour candidates or their local activists. However, Reform UK would also help Labour win even more seats elsewhere. The net effect of Reform UK is entirely positive for Labour at elections. And this is, as I say, unfortunate in many ways. Yes, it makes a Labour government more likely. You know, the bottom line is Reform UK, they're not there to shake up politics. They're not going to win a majority at the next election. If they did, I think the best projection I've seen is they might win 25 seats. That's if everything goes their way. They effectively exist to screw the Tories over. And so they make a Labour government, they always make a Labour government more likely. And that is the main prize as far as people such as myself are concerned. However, it also means that Labour go easy on them during election campaigns. It was very noticeable during the summer election campaign, caused a little bit of friction in areas, that they didn't really spend time targeting Farage or Reform UK at all. And that is because if they did that, they'd be doing the Tories' job for them. You know, undermining the Reform UK campaign is just that. It's causing people to go, oh, maybe we shouldn't vote for Reform UK. And the thing is, that would work on more people who would otherwise vote Conservative than would vote Labour. So they'd actually be giving the Conservatives a net boost. So instead, they just focused on their real opponents, the Conservatives and the SNP. So no, Dan Tomlinson personally is not threatened by Farage, and he's absolutely right not to be threatened. Most Labour MPs are not threatened by Farage strategically, just philosophically. Labour as a campaign machine definitely isn't threatened by Farage. In fact, the uncomfortable truth is that at election time, Farage is an asset for Labour, just like Rishi Sunak was this summer. And if Lucy Willis is typical of the sort of thinking at Reform UK, which may or may not be the case, then it suggests they really don't have a handle on the strategic side of politics after all. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.